Okay, guys, Ohio State has built the national championship winning team in 2025. The 2025 national champion is Ohio State. Now, what I want to do is take a look at this team. How did they build this roster? Where did the production come from? Where did the players come from? And what is the new model for building a championship team in 2025, guys? I'm excited to dive into it. It should be a pretty in-depth dive for you guys. Before we get into it, like the video so I know you appreciate the content. Also, comment down below as I go through this. If you guys feel like I'm giving bad information anywhere, feel free to drop that. Also, if you agree with me, feel free to let me know. Just give me your takes. I want to know what you're thinking. Subscribe to the channel as well if you haven't already. Hit the notification bell. We make a ton of Big 12 and college football related content, so make sure you stick around for all the updates we drop. And let's go ahead and take a look at this Ohio State team's roster. Okay, guys, so we're going to take a look at the stats. We're going to take a look at Ohio State. And one thing that has been rumored about Ohio State is that it is a $20 million roster. These are rumors, but, it's been voiced by many people, so that must have some credence. I mean, you look at their roster too. I mean, it adds up. They've got a lot of high-end players on here. And I want to break it down here, guys, to give you guys just an idea. I mean, this is a roster, at least at the top end, that NIL built. And what I want to specifically do is point out how much of their production came from players that were not on this team last year. So let's start with Will Howard, previous Kansas State quarterback, comes in 292 completions for 402 attempts, 3,700 plus yards, over 70% completion percentage, 33 TDs, 10 INTs. Just a crazy good season by Will Howard. Really, kind of last year, their problem was they couldn't figure out the quarterback situation. Kyle McCord did very well this year at Syracuse, but something was missing when he was at Ohio State, and Will Howard was the piece of that puzzle, did a great job. Then take a look here, guys. The clear highest amount of carries for a running back on this team was Quinshawn Judkins. He had 51 more carries than the next guy in Travion Henderson. They went for about the same amount of yards, but Quinshawn Judkins had 12 touchdowns where Travion had 10. I do think there's an argument because of the average yards per carry that Travion Henderson was the better running back. But total production-wise, I mean, they're both right neck and neck. And the reason I bring that up, guys, is Quinshawn Judkins was their lead carry back, and he wasn't even here last year. He wasn't a transfer from Ole Miss that came in this year and kicked butt, right? He beast. And a lot of people had him as one of the best running backs in all of college football, right? It was constantly brought up. And you can see here too, he caught 20 passes for 140 yards and another touchdown. But then more importantly, guys, when we look at receiving, another player that was not on this roster last year was Jeremiah Smith, 71 receptions, 1,227 yards, 14 touchdowns. Now, Jeremiah Smith was a freshman this year, but just wild. I mean, you got to think NIL was a huge factor in him coming to Ohio State too. He was a freak of nature, 5-star player. Before I misquote myself, I just want to make sure he was a 5-star. I'm 99% sure, but I know if I'm wrong, you guys are going to grill me in the comments. Okay, let's see here. Yeah, 5-star, 101 grade, number one player in the country. Yeah, just a freak. And so you can see here their roster, and you look, he had 300 more receiving, or 500 more almost receiving yards than any other receiver on the team, including Emeka Egbuka, who's going to be a early draft pick when he goes to the draft. And he had 4 more touchdowns than Emeka Egbuka too. So the reason I point all this out, guys, is just showing you guys, this isn't really me having an opinion so far, at least. I'll give you my opinion later on. But you can see here, this was a team that was, I mean, when you consider the quarterback, the number one running back, and the number one wide receiver were all NIL transfer inputs. I mean, that is wild. That is the new era of college football, and this is what we are living with. Great for Ohio State. They took the risks too, and I'm going to show you guys what I mean when I say they took the risks. Because this was risky. You're putting a bunch of new talent in as key pieces. You needed the pieces, but it was like, to do it this way was a little risky because you're going to have to, hope they figured it out by the time it was go time. So let's take a look at Ohio State's season and see how that went down. Okay, guys, and here's the Ohio State football schedule. It starts at Akron, just so we're all on the same page here. And before I break this down, guys, make sure you stick around till the end. I'm going to give you my final thoughts and give a little deeper dive as we get a little farther into it. But let's check out the schedule. So early on, Akron smashing them. I mean, probably just overwhelming these guys with talent. Same thing with Western Michigan. Same thing with Marshall. Same thing with Michigan State. Same thing with Iowa. Then they play Oregon, and they actually lose this game to Oregon, neck and neck, razor thin loss. And they almost lose to Nebraska, and a close one against Penn State as well. And then Purdue, blow them out of the water, talent overload, blow Northwestern out of the water. But you get through this patch of games, and you're an Ohio State fan. You lose to Oregon, you almost lose to Nebraska, and you very close one against Penn State. You're probably a little stressed. You already have one loss in your record, and you better have a good rest of the season. You look here, they blow Purdue out of the water. They blow Northwestern out of the water. They blow Indiana out of the water. Huge win there against a really good team. But they get beat by Michigan. Now they have 2 losses. Previously in college football, you'd be out of the college football playoff hunt. And then, they get to the playoff, and that story is kind of, everyone knows that story. They just have taken off and just killed it. But you look back at the year, I mean, they had all their losses were razor thin, and they were against quality teams. So is what it is there. I just wanted you guys to see that. They did take some bumps and bruises. There were some times where this team wasn't clicking, and I'm sure having so much transfer talent makes it tough, right? Because you're trying to get them to mesh. And sometimes, just like in basketball, you put a bunch of star players on a team, it doesn't click right away. The Lakers are a great example of that. At least Lakers in recent history. So wild season for Ohio State, huge win. And now I'm going to talk about a little deeper about how the college football playoff has been the past few years, the past couple years, and how much transfer players have been a part of that. So let's take a look at that next. Okay, guys, and I'm going to give you kind of my final thoughts and a little bit of a deeper examination into this. Before I do so, though, I want you guys to comment down below. I haven't really given too many opinions yet, really just kind of showing you guys what happened, right? A bunch of awesome high-end transfer talent comes to Ohio State, kicks butt all year, has a couple close losses, but just a firepower. I mean, they're destroying Notre Dame. They're, at the time this video goes live, they will have finished that off, but they were dominating Notre Dame, who really didn't have an easy path to get here either. But this is where the overwhelming talent came into play for Ohio State, where, yes, this $20 million roster started to show, where how are you going to lock down Travion Henderson, Quinshad Judkins, Jeremiah Smith, and Emeka Egbuka? I mean, there's just not a team in college football right now that can do that, right? And shout out to Ryan Day. He's finally getting his natty. That is good for him. Now let's go a little deeper. Comment down below. Like I said, guys, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell so you always know when we drop new videos. Cool to see a former Big 12 quarterback win a national championship. Wish it would have been for a Big 12 team, but still cool to see Will Howard winning that. So my thoughts on the whole situation. So I think the first thing I would look at is the past 2 college football playoffs. So look at the 4 quarterbacks in the past 2 college football playoffs. JJ McCarthy is the only quarterback that is not a transfer in the past 2 college football playoffs. Take a look at it. Washington had Michael Penix. He wasn't a first-year transfer, but he was a transfer who was at Indiana 2 years ago. And he comes to Washington, lights it up, and then makes it to the college football playoff. But they lose, right? JJ McCarthy wins that, but he's the only of the 4 in the past 2 championship games that was not a transfer. In this game, You had Will Howard transfer to Ohio State, and you had Riley Leonard transfer from Duke to Notre Dame. Both of them were first-year transfers. So this was their first year on their new team. And they were the two guys in the national championship, which is wild. And I think we're starting to see, I mean, obviously we've been seeing this for a while where college football has moved to be more like the NFL, right? Where you're grabbing guys in the free agency, you're bringing them to your team. But this is different because of the fact that there's no contracts right now. So in the NFL, for example, if you want a big name player, right? So imagine free agency comes up and you want a big name player. There's a salary cap which is huge, right? Because you can only spend so much to build a roster. But two, if you want a big name player, you're going to have to throw out a big contract. For example, let's imagine there's a wide receiver I really want. And he's one of the best wide receivers in college football. I'm allowed to go offer him whatever I feel is fit if I'm an NFL team. But that guy is going to want a 6-year deal, very likely, with 4 or 5 years guaranteed, if not the whole contract guaranteed, depending on how good he is. And he's going to want a big chunk of my roster, right? He like my salary cap for my roster. And so that investment is huge. It's 6 years of investment, probably fully guaranteed. And I am going to have to pay him a lot of the amount I'm allowed to pay. Where in college football, there is no cap. And there's no contracts really either. Like these guys can just jump from team to team and you can go build up a ridiculous squad in one offseason like Ohio State did. And this is not me saying that's a bad thing. I'm just being real. I'm just making it clear to you guys what happened here. Is Ohio State loaded up with ridiculously good transfers and a freshman phenom, right? That's what happened. New players to the team just went out there and lit up the world. And they weren't the only ones. I mean, I think their defense is very powerful and very good. And, I mean, another huge transfer, Caleb Downs, right? Caleb Downs, monster player on defense, but their defense isn't as transfer heavy. There's some transfers, and Caleb Downs was another top of the transfer portal name. But their defense is a lot of guys they did build up on their own. Whereas their offense, they both have guys they built on their own. It was just the firepower. I mean, I wasn't even thinking of Caleb Downs until just now. But yeah, you bring him up. I mean, this was the roster that NIL maybe didn't build, but completed for sure. And it took them where they need to go. So, I mean, I think that's just kind of where we are until things change. This is what winning teams look like. You have really good recruiting like Ohio State does. You keep bringing in great class after great class. And, the Jeremiah Smith is unprecedented. That was just a crazy year. But a number one player in the class, I mean, it's not that shocking. It's shocking how crazy of a year it was, but I mean, the number one player in the class, you'd expect them to have 800 to 1,000 yards, right? I mean, I'm not shocked about that. So I would love to know what you guys think. Do you agree with my take that the transfers here were the big factor for Ohio State? It felt like it kind of felt like this was the year where the people above Ryan Day in the Ohio State program said, "Hey, we're going to load you up every single piece of freaking talent you can imagine. We are going to give you, but you better go win a national championship." Because I mean, you look at this roster, guys, 20 million for a college football roster. That's wild. Well, that's where I'm at, guys. If you made it this far, please do like the video. Also, comment down below. What are your thoughts on the current NIL situation? How many of these teams that have made the national championship the past 2 years are using transfer quarterbacks? I mean, just want to know your thoughts. I don't think I'm giving too many opinions here, just kind of breaking down the data and making it clear. So I'd love to know what you guys are thinking. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Hit the notification bell. I'm out of here. Go Big 12.